Rand's Expert Insight series. We're glad you joined us. This series is for private equity and mid-market executives who want to use data and dashboards as the short path to increasing growth and profitability. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting Tanya DiCostanzo, Vice President at Trace3, Inc. With headquarters on both coasts and 14 offices nationwide, Trace3 has provided IT strategy, solutions, and services for 20 years to some of the country's most prominent companies. Before Trace3, Tanya worked at IBM, Ingersoll Rand, and Boehringer Ingelheim. She held numerous leadership positions, including Senior Principal Systems Engineer, IT Associate Director, and Global Head of Unified Communications. Tanya has worked for Trace3 since 2015, where she held various director roles before becoming Vice President of IT, Strategic Initiatives, and Insights. Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you.
So we've worked with about 250 companies to date here at Blue Margin, and the consensus among the teams around here is that you personally are one of the most effective data mobilizers, as we like to call it, that we've met. For that reason and others, we're looking forward to discussing your perspective on data intelligence, i.e. business intelligence, dashboards, data analytics, all that stuff, as a catalyst for growth, profitability, company culture, and the like. So great to have you here. To begin with, would you tell us a little more about Trace3, what your core offerings are, differentiators, key metrics, etc.?
Sure, of course. Well, and thank you so much for that data mobilizer compliment. I love that. I'm going to use that. Trace3 is a IT consulting company, N of R. We offer hardware, software, and consulting services. We do business in 48 states. We are actually celebrating our 20th anniversary, which is really amazing when you think about, the company starting just with a couple of guys deciding to start a company. And now here we are, almost a $2 billion company. So it's quite an amazing growth. But just to kind of give you a perspective of what Trace3 does, our core expertise is in cloud security, data intelligence, as well as what we call modern infrastructure, which is really helping companies with that hybrid cloud, getting out of old data centers, moving into the cloud. Like I said, we started 20 years ago. We are headquartered in California, like you mentioned, and we have regional hubs in Colorado, Texas, Michigan, Kentucky, New Jersey, and like I mentioned, California. We have over 3,500 customers, enterprise size as well as mid-size. And over the past 3 years, we have really experienced quite a bit of growth in our business. We've more than doubled. And on our employees, we've grown by 50%. I joined 7 years ago. The company had 500 employees, and today we're 1,200 employees. And one fact that I think is very interesting about Trace3 is that out of those 1,200 employees, 700 are engineers and architects. So it makes it a very fun environment where, really technology is at the core of what we do, and emerging technology more than anything.
It's very impressive. I'd love to hear some more also about your personal journey. You've been at the vanguard of using data in business, covered a lot of ground, and have really helped a lot of organizations use data as an enabler for running their businesses. What steps brought you to where you are today, and what do you love about your work?
Well, I'm going to date myself. So I started my career in the 90s. I actually went to school at CU Boulder. So out of school, I went to work for IBM in the capacity of a network engineer. So your first exposure to data as a network engineer is, how do I fine tune my network? How do I make sure that we're sizing for the right capacity, right? And so early on, you kind of experienced the need for data, but it was all scattered in different tools. And so you have to pull data from different areas in order to be able to make intelligent decisions. And back then, it wasn't that cheap, right? To get internet lines here, and you had to build your own wide area network. So, these were decisions that would represent a big, huge investment for companies to make, and you needed to have that data. So my career kind of started from that perspective, almost like using data from an infrastructure operations perspective. From IBM, I went on to work in the automotive industry, a company owned by Ingersoll Rand. And you can imagine that company when you make things for the automotive industry, failure analysis is a huge thing, right? Operational excellence is a huge thing. So while you're in IT, you're kind of, you kind of have to fit the culture of the company. And so a lot of our IT decisions needed to follow either the Kaizen model, the Six Sigma model. And that's all data that was needed in order to justify your different projects. Most of my career I spent at a pharmaceutical company called Boehringer Ingelheim. And as you can imagine, any pharmaceutical company is really driven by what the scientists do research on, the data they collect, the analytics they do. So again, you're in an IT organization that is kind of has that culture of, hey, data and analysis, that's how we drive our decisions. So that was another area where, again, data had to be used to justify your investments, to justify, even how you solve a problem. You couldn't just say, hey, this is solved. You had to show proof that it was solved by showing the before and after of your data. It's really at Trace3 where I've had the opportunity over the last 2 years to, as VP of IT, to really run a data analytics and insights team. And I got to tell you, it's probably the best part of my job. I love all of the IT groups that I manage, but data analytics and insights, it's really just amazing the aha moments you can get by taking the data that you've had in Excel sheets forever, or you've had in a tool forever, but you then visualize it and you put it on a dashboard and you can see the trends and you can see, hey, why did we have that spike? And that spike happened at the same time that XYZ happened, and you start correlating things. I think it's just that's why they say, right, data is a new economy. It's the best part of, I think, of my job right now. It's the part that excites me the most.
Yeah, that's great. So you've really been at the front lines of a major evolution in data. Has it gotten a lot easier, a lot less expensive, a lot more accessible? Is that obvious?
Way cheaper, that's for sure, and way easier to work with the data, right? So if I think about what we've done at Trace3 in these 7 years that I've been here, we have changed completely our systems. We have acquired companies that didn't exist before. And all of that, right? All of the data that comes with that, we're just putting it into a data warehouse like this, right? It's not like, oh, we need to spin up these servers and we need to, like the old ways in the old data center, and everything would take, months. I mean, we're talking, these companies that we're purchasing and bringing their data in, we're doing them in 6 to 8 months. And we want to do it even shorter than that. And when I say we bring the data, it's not just, bringing the data, it's getting them onboarded into our systems. Any new sales, right, are now integrated into our existing reports. So yeah, I think just the ease of working with the data, how economical it really is, right? Because everything is cloud based now. And the visualization aspects are just amazing at this point. It's like really anyone, in theory, right? Anyone who has a good eye for how to display data can really do it. It's not like the old days that you needed to have all this training. I mean, the tools are easy to use. So if you have a good sense of how you want to organize, how you want people to see the data, you can quickly do it.
Yeah, it's a subtlety, the difference between I can see the data on a spreadsheet, there it is. And what happens when you visualize it and show trends and you're able to click on it and cross filter and drill down and things like that, it makes all the difference, even though the data's already there in some form in tables.
Yeah. Well, some of us need to think. Well, I say some of us. I think most of us think better by seeing the pictures, right? Seeing the ups and downs, seeing how you relate. Like I said, you can relate. The opportunities that are coming in with, hey, how many resources do we have today? And when you put all of that together, it just makes it. You can make not just better decisions, but you can understand the challenges even that the teams are having.
Yeah, and integrating data. So it's not just how's our funnel, how is our backlog, what's our forecast look like, what have our trends been to date for this seasonality, but putting those all together, stacking them in a bar chart, showing them the line of where you need to be, and what's the gap. Just getting to that gap, I think, for most companies is a major challenge. And the data's there. It just is coordinating it and presenting it in a way where you get that aha moment.
Yeah. and clean, right? Because we can get overwhelmed. There's so much data today. There's so much out there. And so when you start projects like this, and this is, this is why we partnered with you guys, because you have a very good sense of, that dashboard, clean dashboard, what gets in that dashboard. We really need to ask why, right? Why do you need that metric? What decision it's gonna drive? Because we can just make a dashboard just so confusing, too many things in there that then it's just not as valuable, right? And so being very precise about that real estate that you have in that one little screen to put the metrics that are the most important ones that you can then have consistency of decisions across the board, alignment and how we look at the business. Again, by making that very, very clean, crisp.
Yeah, it's a lesson that's been hard won for us because the principle of the customer is always right. Ask them what they want and deliver it to them is a sound principle. But if you ask them what are the KPIs and metrics that matter to you and just display them as a smorgasbord of information, it's not nearly as effective as, like you say, asking why. Why does this matter? What questions does it raise? Can we answer them here in context? What actions does it drive? What decisions does it drive? And we learn to develop an ear for, oh, that's just informational. Why? Why do you need that information? If it's just informational and it doesn't do anything, then let's get it out of there because it just confuses the issue.
Yeah. If it doesn't drive action, why have it? Yeah. And you mentioned, the metrics and I think that, so if I look at the evolution of where we are now with data and how we're using it at Trace3, I imagine many teams have this challenge where you have so much data and you don't know what's the right thing, right, to display. And one of the things that I think helped us tremendously is well, a couple of things I should say. One is from the top, right? So from the top, what does the CEO want to look at? What does the CFO want to look at? What does our president want to look like? Having just the vision from them on what is important to measure the business. And when we switched owners in, I want to say last year in November with American Securities, one of the exercises that they did with our leadership team was OKRs, right? Objectives and key results. And, at the beginning, you're just like, oh yeah, these are just SMART goals, right? These are just, specific, measurable. But the beauty of that is that now it was from the top, so our private equity telling our leadership and our leadership agreeing to a specific set of metrics. And until that point, honestly, we had different ways of measuring different business units. Mm-hmm. So it helped tremendously. So I think that is probably my biggest lesson learned being in this field for just a few years, like officially as a business intelligence, is that you really need to understand from the top, what do you need to know from, to measure how we're doing.
Yeah, we take the same approach as you're probably familiar by now, but we look at it as what are the outcomes that we're looking to influence, which is what the top wants to see, and then work your way backwards from there versus jumping into the middle of the pack and saying, what do you need to see? Yes. And they have metrics they care about, but are not necessarily thinking about what's the impact to the outcomes of the business. If you start at that end point or at that top point, as you say, you get a much clearer picture of what you need to surface for folks.
Yeah. When I took over this role, I'm not kidding you, there was a backlog of like 200 and something report requests. And we're like, because anyone in the company could request a report. And you start realizing like, well, it is important, they need these reports, but really if you don't have that top down, it's like you're just spinning your wheels.
We've seen that scenario where the model is to have a catch-all for report requests. So they come in, you look at the specs, ask a few questions, write it, and then send it to them. And then it comes back, could you tweak this? Now that they've seen something, they're doing their own pressure testing. Oh, that really, spurs a question I need answered. Oh, my next insight I need after breakdown by region is breakdown by customer class. And I didn't think of that in the first. And you end up in this sort of endless tail-chasing iteration. Yes. Is that something you guys experienced?
Oh my goodness. It's like you never get a project done. And again, this is why I love working with you guys, because we've leverage you. So we have an internal data and analytics team, right? Obviously, so we can develop our own reports, and we do a lot of our reports in-house. But when it's something new, for example, like how we're going to measure all business units in a consistent way, it helps so much to have someone to be able to say, hey, we got to get this project done. This is what we agreed on. This is what we're going to go on, and kind of break things into phases, where, okay, it's now out there, go use it. Because sometimes by using it, then you realize that the request you had for an enhancement is no longer needed. The tweak that you thought you need, it's no longer needed, because you start just getting familiar.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it could be a never ending story, if we don't put an end to the feedback they can provide.
Yeah, we found a great shortcut is to start out with a sketch of that dashboard. Doesn't have to have real numbers. And we walk through, is this number at the top the thing that we're trying to impact? What do we need to see to know if we're on track or not and get the awareness? And then what's the first question that comes to mind? If that's low, if revenue per project or profitability per customer or whatever the case is low, what's the next thing you need to see? And then we work our way through that. And that pressure test is easy and light and doesn't result in 20 iterations later. You get much closer to the bullseye. So digging in a little further on our partnership, Trace3, more than almost any other company we've worked with, has an internal data analytics and insights team, but you nonetheless partnered with Blue Margin. That might be confusing to folks. At the same time, every company we work with has some resources in analysts and database administrators and various IT people and so on who can do a lot of their data. Why, especially in your case, work with an outside party? I'd like to look at this sort of as a test case or a case study on what would be helpful to other companies as they think about their internal data resources, working with an outside party, that sort of thing. So I guess first, what was the initial motivation for reaching out to Blue Margin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question, because yeah, we do have, not only do we have an internal team focused on data analytics, but we also provide data analytics as a service to our customers. And I think there's an expression that says the mechanic's kid's car never gets fixed. It's one of those situations with us. Like, we had a lot of needs on the reporting and analytics, and we really needed to establish a group that could do that. And so that's how the team that I'm now responsible for got started. 2-3 years ago. And why we wanted to partner with Blue Margin, a vendor like Blue Margin, was really twofold, I would say. One was augment our team, because we were a very small team and we had a lot of requests. I think second is speed to market, right? So you can do things internally that require a new way of thinking, but it can take a little bit longer when it's the people that are internal. So by having someone external kind of saying, hey, this is how, this is what good looks like, and we've made it look good in other places, that helps almost like break the barrier that we might have had of how we were always looking at things in one way. And I think that's what Blue Margin brought to the table for us. We did have, as part of American Securities, we did talk to another one of their portfolio companies who had worked with you, with your company, and that's when we're like, oh, okay, we see what they did there, so this will be helpful. The beauty of the partnership that we built is that, like anything, right? You first, you're giving everything to the vendor. Hey, help me. And now we're at the point where it's like, hey, I see what you're doing. We like that. We're going to adopt that. We're going to do this too. And let's now, you don't have to do it all. We can do some of this development, but the best practices have been almost like adopted, right? And that makes it easier to then, for the internal team, to develop more, to develop quicker, as requirements come in. So I would say, those were some reasons. Now, things that I didn't expect and that I've seen in the partnership is really your ability to push back. Again, like I mentioned before, on why do you need this? And we internally were not asking that. We assumed that what they needed, what our internal customers needed to see was the right thing. And so I think that the confidence that the team has, your team has in asking the why is because you've done similar things across the board, right, for other companies. So I think that that's been very valuable for us to learn and to adopt as we start doing these requirement gatherings as well.
Yeah, again, another hard won lesson when we built dashboards to spec based on requests from the requester, the subject matter expert, and delivered them. They had anemic results. They didn't adopt them very well. They weren't thrilled, and we thought, well, what the heck? That's what they asked for. And so we learned if we don't internalize and understand, oh, that makes sense. I see how that drives that outcome. And the engineers and the visualization folks working on it don't really feel that and get it. If they ever say, I don't know why this is here, that's what they wanted, we're, stop the presses. We need to make sure we understand what this is doing and why. Then you start to, that pressure testing gets the adoption. And really that's the name of the game. If people are looking at data, they orient to the numbers, it changes their prioritization, their focus, their alignment across the team. And that's what you're after. The goal line is not delivering dashboards. The goal line is they're adopting them, and it's changing how they think, right?
And they're making decisions based on the data that's being shown. And the other beauty of the visualization of the data is that you also see mistakes or areas of improvements, I should say, that weren't clear before. Why are we doing things this way? Why are we attributing, services this way? Or why are we making an investment in this service? It makes you kind of question.
Have you put out dashboards just to expose that the data is not as clean as it should be as a way to get compliance around how people are entering data and processes and things like that? Or have you waited more until the data is just so before you present it?
No, we've actually have one of the big push from our president is we call it the CRM hygiene effort, which is really highlighting how many opportunity records are not up to date, right? So it's very important for us in order to do our pipeline and our forecast to make sure that all of the opportunities that are in our CRM are as updated as possible. What's the possibility, the probability of closure, when do we think it's going to close, and all of that information, that you would expect from a normal CRM. We need to do more on that. Now, Trace3 is 20 years old. So I call it, hey, we're a young adult. We were just kids just a few years ago. There was no discipline around this because we were just growing, right? And we were kind of like just getting out of being a startup to being a teenager. I know what I'm doing. I don't need all of this, structure and all of this discipline. Well, we're a big company now, and we have really aggressive growth goals. And so having visibility, right? Is so important. It's no longer as easy as just calling someone and say, hey, is so-and-so busy? I mean, we have 1,200 people.
Right.
You got to make sure that all that information is captured in a system. So, we try to put things that are going to be used to measure the business, that we want to make sure that the data is accurate, and we have different levels of testing and validation that happens for that. But then we do have a set of reports that it's intentional. Hey, there's some errors here. You better go check, and you're going to be on the report, the naughty list report.
Yeah, it's exceptions reports, those sorts of things.
Yes.
It's an interesting balance of knowing how clean should the data be. If you wait until it's just perfect, you'll never have a dashboard. If you put it out and it's a complete mess, it may not make enough sense to drive change. We tend to err more towards get it out there in its current form, surface it so people can see. It's centrally available. It's up in lights, transparent to everyone. And our funnel is half of what we thought it was. No, it's actually twice what it's showing there. Well, let's fix the data.
Exactly.
So it can drive that process, but it's an interesting balance. There's some art there for sure. So what have been the results so far, specifically from your executive team's OKR dashboard that we worked with you on, some sales reporting that we worked with you on? Can you speak to any impacts or expected impacts from those?
Yeah, the OKR dashboard has really been very, very helpful to create alignment across the different executive areas that we have. Again, because we were looking at, let's choose one of the OKRs was emerging technology. How much of our sales and our services is based on emerging technologies? That's a very important metric for Trace3 because what makes us so successful is the fact that we find companies that are not yet, mainstream, right? We
Mm.
find companies that are just starting that have a new technology, and we figure out how to make that technology accessible and usable by our customers. Like I said, we have enterprise level customers, mid market. So um, knowing how much of our sales is driven by emerging technology is a critical metric for us. And before the OKR, we had different ways of doing that. There was one way that was being done from a finance perspective. There was a different way being done from the people that are working with those partnerships with the emerging technology vendors. And so by coming together and just agreeing on a definition on what are we going to call emerging vendor versus emerged vendor, right?
Mm.
Emerge is, yeah, you've been around now. You're not, and just coming to an agreement on that. That's what the OKR process has given us, and the dashboard has provided the transparency of the data, right? So now you don't have different reports by different groups presenting maybe data that doesn't completely align. And when you look into it, you know why it doesn't align. It's because we weren't defining it the same way. When we acquired one of the companies that we acquired, again, it's terminology. We had shipped, they use shipped, we use invoiced, right? And all of
Right.
that drives financials. So you need to come to an agreement on, okay, well, you get paid when things are shipped, we get paid when things are invoiced. So we gotta come up with a standard way of defining the metric because that metric is going to drive then the next step.
So that increased clarity on some of those metrics that you've just discussed, emerging and ship versus other nomenclature. Have you seen some impact? Has it brought the team into focus? Has it improved outcomes? Can you speak to that yet?
It has definitely brought consistency in how we speak about our business performance. It has made, especially like, a lot of the requests that come to our team are now we're more cognizant of like, hey, it took us a while to standardize on this way of looking at the data on what the definition for this metric is. So we're now not just saying, oh yes, we can do that. No, we have to make sure that we're still following this standard. Why? Because now the data that we're showing is not just being used by a small group, say the executives, right? It's now trickling down, right? They are sharing it now with their direct reports, and those GMs are sharing it with their sales teams.
Yeah.
And so you start getting this trickle down effect of the data that was created for a group, right? Um, and that's important because now everybody is going to measure their performance in a similar way. So specific examples that I can give you, like I report to the COO, and I know this is very dear to his heart, is resource utilization. um, Before he joined the company, we really didn't have a standard way of looking at resource utilization, and that has now become critical to many discussions on how do we,
Profitability.
yeah, and do we make an investment in that skill set? Why? Is it because we have so many service engagements that the pipeline is showing that we need, say, more cloud security engineers? And so looking at resource utilization, not just from, hey, are you fully billable or not, but like the skill set, it has really informed our leadership on where to make investments.
Yeah. Let's take a second on that OKR dashboard. It was something of a revelatory insight for us working with you because that dashboard is manually populated, right? There's a form that we set up and you can put in the thresholds and you can put in the current score. you think of BI, one of the great advantages is plugging into source systems and automating the refresh of data and the dashboard subsequently. But this one was manual, and we've adopted it now into our VCP, Value Creation Plan Accelerator, which is from day one, you can stand up a dashboard that an analyst manually populates and updates weekly within a week or two, and create that alignment and start forcing those questions around how do we define key metrics, some of which you've mentioned. It was an interesting approach. How did we get there? What's your thought on doing a manual dashboard like that versus automated?
Yeah, we had a lot of conversations about that because the original intent was really to have it all automated. So I think there are two sides to this. One is the way the OKRs, so OKR process is new to us, right? It's just since American Security acquired us. So the OKR process is new. Like any new process, it takes a while for people to understand that an OKR must be measurable, and we need to have the data available to measure that. So what happened to us is that some of the OKRs that were defined, while important to the business, we did not have the data in a way that could be pulled automatically into it. So we had a couple of metrics that we could, and we did automate those. A lot of the financial driven ones, we could automate those. But there were some other ones like, I'm just going to pick like our employee engagement survey, ensuring that our culture stays strong and that we increase by a certain number of points, right? Well, that is not something that we'll be able to pull directly, so it has to be manually updated. The beauty of it too, I think, which is what you're alluding to, is the fact that it made the tool very flexible, because we actually looked at OKR dashboards out of the box. And one of the challenges that we saw is that it's not as flexible. You cannot modify things, and so we needed to have a little flexibility, again, because OKR process was new to us. We didn't have all of the data available, and so the dashboard that you guys built for us helped us achieve that.
Yeah, that's great. I think that was a very helpful insight that we came to through the partnership, that if we wait around till everything's connected before we sort of have a master view of what are the vitals of this company that define our growth plan, then you get there in 6, 12, 18 months instead of let's get that today. That becomes the roadmap for building out automation and connecting to systems and for trickle down dashboards that go into the organization. But we can get that day one and get that alignment and really have a scoreboard for our growth plan.
Yeah, it gets the conversation going. Otherwise, you can't. Otherwise, it's all too nebulous, right? So the key of what we have to do, and that's why I thought the data mobilizer comment was, I thank you, but I don't think I'm a data mobilizer as much as I'm just a mobilizer of projects, because, you can't get everything done up front. Like, you got to just choose. You may have 100 things you want to get done. You got to just go down to, hey, 5. And those 5 things, let's show the value. And once I convince you that there's value on this, then we'll move on to the next. And I think with the dashboard, I mean, if you think about it, from when the project started to when the product was presented, I think it was like 3 months, 3.5 months max. I mean,
Yeah.
with data and everything, like, being shown to people and being used. And we started with nothing, like not even agreements on what some of these metrics should mean. So I think being able to be quick, narrow the scope enough that you can show the value, and then you continue to add pieces.
Was that a significant turning the lights on moment for the executives? Did they say, oh my gosh, it's the first time we've been able to see this stuff clearly?
Yes, but I would say the regional reporting package is way more than that. So that is the next project that we're working, that we engage you guys. We Joe Quaglia is our new president. He was hired this year, and he came with a very, very this is what's so beautiful, right? Is when you have that vision. So he came with a very precise vision of the data he needed to manage sales, to manage the business performance of a sales organization. He's got years and years of experience working at these major distributors. He's used to using data, making decisions based on data. So he came with a very clear picture of, hey, for me to know how we're doing, I need X, Y, Z. I need it year to year. I need it quarter to quarter. Like it was just, so when you have that clarity, it makes the building much easier. And I think that regional reporting package is something that is really revolutionary, really, for Trace3. We just gave an update on Friday to our executive steering committee, and they were just wowed by how comprehensive it is. Like nobody can say now, hey, the data's not there. No, the data's there. You have a lot. Now you just need to filter it, use it. And we are talking about how do we help people know how to make decisions based on the data that we're now showing that is now available. So that'll be the next phase of this.
That's great. I imagine also that starting at the top, as you said, what are the insights that matter most to the executives, which is synonymous with what are the metrics that most define the success of the company, and getting them thinking about that, orienting to that, and then putting out an OKR dashboard so they could see it, probably help to crystallize that vision for them of, oh, here's the insights that we need that support even those, and just gave them a picture for the potential of visualizing their data.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do think having a vision from the top is very helpful when you start a data analytics team. But as you mature as a team, there will be things that come to you. So if we think of next year, right, and I think we all know we're going into economy slowing down, right? So what are the things that we want to look at? So the fact that there are people at all levels of the organization thinking about operational efficiencies, right, will drive the request on the data that we want to look at. And so while, yeah, there's value in the top down, and I would say a sponsorship and all of that is very critical to have a standard way of looking at the business. You also need to go bottoms up on like this, like where can we have efficiencies? What data do I need in order to see that I am running my shop in the most efficient way?
So it may be obvious, but is it more important to have visibility into the data in economic uncertainty? And that must be tough because you got to invest more with your team at a time when people are worried about overhead.
Yeah. So, I'm back office, right? I'm back office. I am the necessary evil, so to speak, right? I don't make money for the company. I consume money. But how we can help to the contribution margin of the company is by keeping our operational expenses low. And so, one of the initiatives that my manager has, who is the CEO of the company, is, hey, if we look at our journey of data and analytics, we first focus on finance. Let's make sure finance has everything they need. And that was, I would say 2 years ago was like all about like, let's make sure finance has what they need. This year was all about, hey, what does sales needs from a data and analytics, right? And we've done that, right, with the reporting package. 2023 is going to be about what do we need in order to make sure that we are running the most optimized operations across the organization. And that is not just IT operations or what's under, the COO office, but it's like our warehouse operations, right? Our services operations. We have sales operations and this whole concept of RevOps, right? So how do we keep our operations in check by looking at data, right? Not just, oh, I'm going to save this, but really looking at the data and that the changes, the tweaks you're making are really resulting in a savings or hey, it takes less time to do this. Or if we automated something that we can see that, right, with the data and that will help us then improve, our margin. So that's going to be a big focus for us in 2023 is, we're calling it the operational efficiency reporting package, right? How will each one of these internal, back office teams, how will they be measured to ensure that they are being the most efficient with the resources that they have?
Yeah, when things are tight, your scrutiny goes up, and when you're in a bull market and companies are fat and happy, they're less concerned with the details and more concerned with just trying to keep their legs under them as they race. Do you have any sort of thoughts generally for leaders inside of mid-market companies that are in charge of or the point person for improving how the company uses data? Any thoughts on the importance of that? I think you've covered several areas there, but advice for folks in that position of how to make headway and to make sure that the resources they're spending are returning good return on investment, those sorts of things. Any thoughts for them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would say alignment and sponsorship is number one, right? So before you jump into this, make sure that you understand what your leadership is expecting from the data, like what's important to them to measure. Because once you show success there, then I think you can move on, to other areas. So I would say that making sure you have the right sponsorship and understanding of what your leaders need. The second thing I would say is essentialism, like the book says, like, be very targeted. Don't try to boil the ocean. There is just so much data out there, so much noise out there. Keep it simple. Nothing is really rocket science, right? Keep things simple. I would say that that's the next thing, and I do think that there's value in having an outside vendor help out. And like I said at the beginning, I think the value comes in that you become so insular, right? You're so focused on your business. This is how we've always measured things. This is how we've always done things. And to have someone from the outside come and challenge some of our, why do we calculate things this way? Hey, why are you looking at that field instead of this field? That kind of helps you think through it. And it's not just the data and analytics team, because these projects are not just driven by IT. They're cross functional, right? You have the finance and you have sales and so making us all kind of rethink why we're doing things the way we are is very helpful. So I would say, find also a vendor who you can partner with. Not that you just throw things over the fence and then bring it back. No, it's, hey, let's work together. You're an extension of my team. Let's figure this out together and make it happen. And I appreciate you challenging and pushing back. And I think that that's an important aspect as well.
So what's next on the horizon for you? What's the next frontier you're conquering?
So I have a dream of something. We've talked as a team internally of this federated model. So I believe that it's making the data available to people where you're going to get the true insights. Like, I am not an expert in a specific technology. I'm not an expert in sales. I'm not an expert in finance. I'm not an expert, right? But I'm making this data available to you. So there's just so many questions that I can help you answer, right? But the idea, the ideal situation of analytics is to answer questions that no one has even asked yet, right? That you see a trend, and that usually requires what I call business expertise, right? So you need to have the person who is living and breathing in that business area to have access to what we're calling curated data sets, standardized data sets, and they can run analytics on that. And I think that's when that collective intelligence that data can provide us, that's when it kicks in. So I would like to have in 2023 kind of start this process of, hey, how do we have a certain number of data sets that are curated, that are standard, that we say, okay, they're vetted, and make them available to like citizen scientists, right? To a few people out there that will become an extension of our team, work within the, our standards, but that they can analyze the data way better than we can. So that's where I would like to see us move next. And then the other area too that I think we can do a lot on the Trace3 side is making data available to our customers. So we've been now in business 20 years. Some of our customers have been with us 20 years. And so to be able to make their life easier by giving them history of orders, history of their invoices. I even dream of a loyalty program. I mean, I would love to have something like, hey, you spent with us, this much, and so making all of that data accessible to them where they can go get it on their own, like a self-help portal, which we are working towards. I see there's going to be a lot of value there because people like to work with customers. I mean, with vendors, sorry, with partners, where the relationship is easy, where I can go quickly and go get my list of, what movies did I watch on Netflix, right? That's why I buy Netflix. I've been a Netflix customer for a long time. I love that ease. We need to make that very easy for our customers as well.
Yeah, transparency between vendor and customer goes a long way.
Yes.
And trust. What last thing, what's the medium that you envision for that federated approach where you have power users, citizen scientists out there analyzing the data themselves? Are they digging into a data mart with tables of facts and dimensions and trying to get that level of expertise? Or is it more in the Power BI canvas, being able to drag and drop elements from that standard model or that focus model for their area? Do you have a picture of that yet?
Yeah, what we're thinking, and again, this is all still, we haven't actually executed, but their thoughts of going, is that we would have, we would create workspaces. It would be in Power BI. We would create workspaces for the different areas where we have a, someone who is part of the federated model, a functional lead was what we're calling it. We would have a functional person that would help us. And we would say, okay, these data sets, say the bookings data set and the utilization data sets, which are the ones that are, I would say the most mature one. These are the ones that you can use as, and the part that the part that we're still kind of struggling is how do we control what else is brought in? You know what I mean? We need to have some level of control of what extra data is brought in. Yes. So that's the part that we're still kind of struggling. But our thought is that we could use Power BI for this federated model internally. And even based on feedback from your team, we could even use Power BI for our customers once we decide to, because in the future, if you think about it, we could make orders, like these are the assets, you purchase from us, here you can do more analysis with it if you'd like.
I'll look forward to that. That's great. For those who want to connect with you further, Tanya, what's the best avenue?
Tanya DiCostanzo at Trace3.com. Happy to help anyone that has that is just starting this journey. I may sound like I know what I'm talking about, but I'm telling you, I'm new to this. It's been just a couple of years, but it is a fascinating field. Having partners like Blue Margin has been extremely helpful. So, my email is Tanya DiCostanzo at Trace3.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you have a verified account on Twitter for $8 a month.
I'm getting there.
Or at least some people impersonating you. Well, thanks for your time, and I look forward to hearing more about the journey and then continuing the partnership. I really appreciate your insights today. Very helpful.
Thank you, John, for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure working with your team.
Thank you.